Hello everyone, and welcome back to another Sensei series. Today we're looking at 7 ways to funkify your guitar solos with rhythm. I've had many people come to me seeking advice as to how they can create more interest in their soloing. Usually they're looking for new scales and techniques. Too often the idea of rhythm is neglected. Rhythm is deeply rooted in all of us, and doing interesting stuff with it is a sure way to engage an audience. Going forward, I'm going to assume that everyone has a decent understanding of the building blocks of rhythm. If you need a refresher, you should be seeing a link up there to a video on that very subject. Links to the individual tips we'll cover today are down there in the description. Ladies and gentlemen, let's dive in. Number 1, use a variety of note lengths. This is the simplest topic we'll look at today, but can often be overlooked. It's a very natural motion for us guitar players to pick up and down with the beat. This will lend itself to 16th notes or 8th notes depending on the tempo of the song. While these notes are absolutely wonderful, the problem is when you lack variety, it can sound rather bland. We want to use a combination of note lengths to develop motifs and rhythmic ideas. Let's take an example, and for all examples today, I'm only going to use notes from the trusty old pentatonic scale so we can focus on the rhythm. First, I'll use a string of 16th note phrases. To me, that's pretty drab. Let's try another with a variety of note lengths. It's fewer notes and much more appealing to my ear. You can break down the beat into quarter, eighth, whole, or half notes, as well as smaller denominations like 16th notes, 32nd, 64th, and so on. But you have more options than breaking down the note evenly as we have so far. Which brings us to point number 2, use tuplets. A tuplet is when we divide our beat irregular to what would most instinctively be used. For example, when we have 4 quarter notes in a bar, we would expect our beat to be subdivided in groups of 2s. 8th notes, 16th notes, like we discussed before. Well, we can also subdivide our beat in different groupings, like a triplet, for example, where we put 3 notes in a beat. We could also put a triplet within the space of an 8th note, half note, whole note, and so on. These irregular groupings can perk up the ear. Here's an example with a variety of triplets. While triplets are the most common tuplet we hear, we can also break down our beat using other numbers. Instead of using 3-note groupings, we could also use 5 notes, called quintuplets. 7 notes works as well. The application of this will be limited to your creativity. One thing you can do to create great results is tie together notes in your tuplet. Instead of individually playing each note in a triplet run like this, you can also hold out a note to cover the length of multiple tuplets. My biggest piece of advice for applying this stuff is go slow and use a metronome. Moving on to something a little bit easier to comprehend. Number 3, alter phrase length. I've mentioned this concept in other videos, but music is very similar to language. When soloing, we're telling a story. Like any well-written story, there should be punctuation and structure. Think of those YouTube comments you see that are one big block of text. Verbal diarrhea. With music, we want to avoid the equivalent of those run-on sentences. Let the music breathe. Think about the pacing of your phrases. Great stories have long, flowing, majestic, descriptive sentences, contrasted nicely with short, to-the-point ones. Here's an example where I try to create interest using different phrase length. In a similar vein to this idea is point number 4, start and end your phrases in different places. By staggering the spacing, we can keep things interesting even if all we ever do is play notes of the same length. Let's compare 2 examples. In the first, I'll start and end my phrases in the same places. Now I'll try to add some variety. To practice this, I would highly recommend you record and analyze yourself improvising. You don't need fancy software, use your phone, whatever. Listen back, write out what you did, and see if you have some common tendencies that you find uninteresting on playback. One little thing that I personally enjoy is starting my phrases on the offbeat. Try things like that out. Number 5, use unusual accents. Generally speaking, we would expect the downbeats of our bar to have more rhythmic emphasis than the offbeats. But by placing those emphases in other places, we can create some interesting results. This is a simple example. You can obviously use this in more musical ways. This is what we call syncopation, placing rhythmic emphasis on parts of the meter that are not normally accented. Using this syncopation, we can also imply polyrhythms. Number 6, use polyrhythms. A polyrhythm is when we essentially play two rhythms at the same time together. For example, here's a rhythm in 3/4 played at the same time as a rhythm in 4/4 at the same BPM. This is sometimes called 3 against 4 and can alternatively be written as such. By implying a different rhythm over the underlying one, it can sound pretty wild. We can use accents to create this effect. Say I accented the 8th notes in 3-note groupings over 4/4, where we would expect the accent to happen in 2-note groupings. This creates a pretty cool 3/8 feel over top. You could also accent in 5-note groupings. How about 2 followed by 3-note groupings? You can go fairly deep down this rabbit hole, as you can probably tell. To wrap this up, let's talk about number 7, using rhythmic quotes. This is a simple trick that I'll use when the well of ideas is running dry. It's as easy as using the rhythm of a song or passage that you know while changing the notes. You don't need to do an exact recreation, but use it as a source of inspiration. Here's a short solo inspired by Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. There you have it, 7 ways to funkify your guitar solos with rhythm. There are a lot of tools here, there's no need to work on them all at once, and try to use them tastefully. I want to remind everyone that my Lil Wayne contest is still going on till the end of August 2017, it's not too late to get your entries in. For more information, you can click on that video over there. A big thank you to everyone who supports me on Patreon, and a thank you to all of you who tune in on the regular. I'm Samurai Guitarist, and I will see you again soon.